yet strangely present. The air smelled of exhaust fumes, and something vaguely sweet and artificial. The ground beneath him was hard, unyielding concrete, Samson/Kwame perspective. My senses returned in fractured pieces. The taste of metal on my tongue, the gritty feel of rough pavement beneath my cheek. The cacophony of unfamiliar sounds assaulting my ears. A high-pitched whine, a deep rumbling, voices speaking in a rapid, incomprehensible tongue. I pushed myself up, my body protesting with unfamiliar aches. My vision swam, then slowly focused. I was in a narrow alleyway, the walls covered in strange, colorful markings. The sky above was a pale, hazy gray, crisscrossed by thick black lines that seemed to carry the hum I heard. And then I saw her. She stood a few feet away, framed by the alley's entrance. Her hair was the color of a ripe plum, styled in a way that defied gravity. Her clothes were a riot of clashing patterns and strategically placed tiers. She was small, but her stance held a defiant energy, and her eyes, wide and intensely curious, were fixed on me. Behind her, several figures loomed, their postures radiating menace. They wore similar, though less flamboyant, attire and carried objects that glinted ominously in the dim light. Her words, when they came, were as unexpected as her appearance. They were in English, a language I had encountered in my studies of future possibilities in Japan, but spoken with a cadence and slang that was foreign. "Whoa," she said, her head tilted. "Never seen a black samurai before. You cosplayin', or did I finally hit the good stuff?" She chewed on something pink and bubbly. Then her expression shifted, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features as she glanced behind her. "Aw, for real? Can't a girl take out the damn trash in peace?" She looked back at me, her gaze sharp. "Name's Florence Baxter, but my enemies call me Lyricannon. And you Steel Samurai? I hope you can fight. Looks like I'm in the middle of taking out the trash, and you just wandered into the dumpster." The figures behind her shifted, muttering threats in the same unfamiliar tongue. Their eyes, like hers, flicked between me and her, a mix of aggression and confusion. I observed them, my training kicking in despite my disorientation. They moved with a street-level swagger, but their energy lacked discipline. They were predators, but not particularly skilled ones. "Fight?" I echoed, the English words feeling strange and heavy on my tongue. My hand instinctively went to the hilt of my katana, but found only empty air. Panic, colder than the Fuji wind, clenched my chest. My blade gone. Florence, Lyricannon, seemed to notice my distress. "Lost your toothpick, Chief? Don't worry, looks like we got plenty of pointy things to go around." She gestured to the makeshift weapons the gang members held. Pipes, lengths of chain, a wicked-looking knife. Despite the loss of my katana, and the utter bewilderment of my surroundings, a familiar resolve began to solidify within me. Warrior's instinct. Protect the vulnerable. Assess the threat. Survive. "They threaten you?" I asked, my voice still rough. Lyricannon snorted. "Threaten? Honey, these clowns threaten pigeons. But yeah, they're trying to make my life difficult. Usually I handle it myself, but you showing up like a lost extra from a Kurosawa flick, that's a new variable." She grinned, a flash of something fierce in her eyes. "So, Samurai, you in?" My gaze swept over the gang members, their crude weapons and posturing bravado. They were a different kind of Oni, perhaps. Less monstrous in form, but no less predatory in spirit. And this, Florence Baxter. Lyricannon. She faced them with a defiant spark. "I am without my weapon," I stated, the lack of my katana a physical ache. "Details, details." Lyricannon waved a dismissive hand. She reached behind her and pulled out a length of metal pipe, wrapped in brightly colored tape. She tossed it to me. It felt clumsy and unbalanced in my grip. Improvise. That's what we do in Brooklyn. Brooklyn. Another unfamiliar word to add to the growing list. But the intent was clear. She was offering an alliance, and these thugs were the immediate threat. "Then I will fight," I said, my voice regaining its steadiness. The flow, though disrupted by the chaotic journey, still resided within me. A sword was not the only weapon a warrior possessed. Discipline, focus, and the will to protect. These transcended time and steel. Lyricannon grinned, a wild, almost manic expression. "That's what I like to hear, Steel Samurai. Let's take out the trash." 2 is titled A Brutal Brooklyn Ballet, and the act name is Brooklyn in My Soul. The complete content of Chapter 2 follows. Chapter 2, A Brutal Brooklyn Ballet. The Brooklyn alley was suddenly a pressure cooker. The air, thick with the smells of damp brick and overflowing dumpsters, now crackled with the promise of violence. For the Roach clan, it was a routine shakedown. For Florence Baxter, it was another Tuesday. For the man named Kwame, a warrior displaced by centuries, it was a battlefield unlike any he had ever known, with a weapon he did not understand, and an ally who was a mystery unto herself. The first punch was about to be thrown. Florence Lyricannon Baxter perspective. The leader of this particular pack of losers is a guy named Sal. He fancies himself a kingpin, but his ambition far outweighs his IQ. He cracks his knuckles, a sound like stale breadsticks snapping, and gives me his best tough guy sneer. It's adorable, really. "You got a new boyfriend, Flo," he sneers, jerking his chin toward my new, oversized friend. "Heard you were into the strong, silent type, but this is ridiculous." "Nah, Sal, he's my new interior decorator," I shoot back, giving the pipe in Kwame's hands a little pat. "He specializes in rearranging faces. You want to be his first project? That's all it takes." Sal's face contorts in rage. So predictable. And he lunges. "Get him." I meet him halfway. I'm no slouch in a scrap. A quick sidestep, a sharp elbow to the ribs, and Sal's tough guy act deflates with a sad little oof. Two of his cronies come at me, one with a chain. I duck under a clumsy swing, my foot lashing out to kick the guy's knee. He goes down howling. This is my rhythm, my dance. Street fighting is just chaotic choreography. I glance over to see how my samurai is doing. I expect to see him swinging that pipe like a confused lumberjack. I'm expecting to have to save his butt. I could not have been more wrong. It's a ballet. A brutal, terrifyingly efficient ballet. He's not fighting like a brawler. He's moving like a master. He holds the clumsy pipe not like a club but like a quarterstaff. He's not using the end. He's using the entire length of it. A thug with a knife rushes him, and Kwame doesn't block. He deflects. A smooth, upward motion of the pipe redirects the knife arm, and in the same fluid movement, the other end of the pipe cracks against the man's elbow with a sickening crunch. The man drops, screaming. Another comes from his other side, and Kwame pivots, the pipe hooking the man's ankle and sending him face first into the unforgiving concrete. No wasted motion, no flashy moves, just brutal physics, applied with the grace of a tidal wave. I'm so stunned I almost forget to kick the chain guy in the teeth again, for good measure. Samson/Kwame perspective. The weapon is crude. It has no edge, no soul. It is a length of cold, unthinking iron. But the principles of combat remain. The body is still a collection of levers and pivot points. Bone still breaks under focused pressure. My mind, free from the bewilderment of my arrival, now sees only the patterns of the fight. These men are not warriors. They are jackals. They fight with rage, not discipline. Their movements are wide, their footwork sloppy. They telegraph their every intention. The one with the knife attacks first. His lunge is clumsy, his weight too far forward. I do not meet his force. I guide it. My training with the bow staff in the mountains of Japan serves me now. The pipe becomes an extension of my arms. I turn his own momentum against him, exposing the joint of his arm. A short, sharp strike is all that is required. The satisfying crack of bone is a familiar sound, even in this strange new world. Another approaches from my blind spot. I do not need to see him. I can feel the disturbance in the air, the shift of his weight in the flow of the alley. I pivot, sweeping his legs from under him. He falls without grace. This is not the art of the katana, a dance of deadly cuts and killing blows. This is something more fundamental. It is the application of force and balance. It is ugly, but it is effective. The pipe has no honor, but it has utility. The last two remaining thugs see their comrades fall. Their rage gives way to a flicker of fear. They decide to rush me together, a foolish, desperate tactic. One swings a heavy length of pipe, aiming for my head. I do not move to block it, in the traditional sense. Instead, as the pipe descends, I center myself. I open my spirit. I let the kinetic energy of the blow wash over me, into me. It is a jarring, physical force, but the principle is the same as the Oni's rage. It is energy, and energy can be held. For a moment, I feel the force of his attack contained within my own muscles. Then, with a focused exhalation, I release it. My own pipe becomes a conduit. I do not just swing. I unleash a wave of force. My strike connects with the thug's chest, and the redirected energy lifts him off his feet, sending him flying backward to crash into a pile of trash bags with a pathetic whimper. The final thug freezes, his eyes wide with disbelief and terror. He drops his weapon with a clatter and scrambles away, vanishing out of the alley. Silence returns, broken only by the groans of the defeated and the distant, ever-present hum of this new world. I look down at the pipe in my hands, a crude tool for a crude age. But it worked. Florence, Lyricannon, Baxter perspective. My jaw is on the floor. I just watched this guy take a full-force swing from a lead pipe like it was a stiff breeze, and then he hit the other guy so hard he literally flew. Flew. I've seen some stuff on these streets, but that was not normal. That was some straight-up superhero shit. The alley is quiet now, except for the symphony of groans from the Roach clan. They're not getting up anytime soon. I walk over to my samurai. who is just staring at the pipe in his hands like he's trying to solve a complex math problem. "Damn, dude," I say, my voice a little breathless. "For a guy without a sword, you really know how to take out the trash." He looks up at me, his eyes filled with a deep, ancient weariness, but also a flicker of something else. Understanding. He is a warrior, and a warrior's purpose is to fight. It doesn't matter if it's an Oni on a mountain or a bunch of thugs in Brooklyn. The dance is the same. The principles are the same, he says, his deep voice seeming to absorb the noise of the city. Yeah, I'm starting to think my day just got a whole lot more interesting. This isn't just some cosplayer. This is the real deal. And he's in my alley. Chapter 3, The Shadow Architect. The walk from the alley to Florence's apartment had become a forced march through a different kind of haunted forest. The roar of passing vehicles was the cry of metallic beasts, and the air itself was a chaotic symphony of a million different lives. For Kwame, it was a profound and disorienting assault on the senses. For the unseen entity nestled in the very flow of Brooklyn, it was a magnificent crescendo. Samson/Kwame perspective. I followed Florence through the towering, painted canyons of the street. My chest still ached with the memory of the fight, but more troubling was the lingering presence of the thug's rage. When the last brute was sent flying, a clumsy, desperate strike, I had felt the raw kinetic energy of his weapon absorb into my core. I had welcomed it. The principles were the same as the Oni's rage, energy that could be held. But this rage was different. It left a residue, a faint metallic taste on my spirit, colder than the Fuji wind I remembered. "You okay, Chief?" Florence asked, glancing back. Her plum-colored hair was a riot of color against the grimy backdrop, a vibrant beacon of defiance. "My flow is unsettled," I said, the words feeling insufficient. And then the voice came. It was not external, not the chaotic cacophony of the city. It was a low, guttural thrum that resonated inside my skull, a sound like the compression of 1,000 angry, ancient souls. Unsettled, an apt choice of word, warrior. It is a word for a man who has forgotten his duty. I froze. No one but I could have heard it. I scanned the crowds, but the faces were the blank masks of this time, consumed by their glowing rectangles. "You hold the seed of my architecture, Kwame. You absorb the sound of my purpose. Did you think the energy of a shadow would be clean?" I recognized the sickness. It was the same corrupting force that animated the Oni, but this was the progenitor. This was the source code of the Oni's destructive energy. It was a being of ancient vengeance and deception. "Show yourself, demon," I commanded, my hand clamping down on the empty space where my katana should have been. "Behold the hero," the voice, Kage intoned, a chilling blend of ancient authority and venomous emotional intensity. "You stand as the guardian of a forgotten trivial code, but I smell the cowardice on your soul. The moment you let go of your friend Kenji, as the vortex tore you both asunder. You cling to the code of the samurai, yet you failed your brother. The assault was a psychological torture. It was not a physical blow, but a weaponized revelation, stripping away the lie I told myself, that I had tried to save Kenji. The truth was, fear had loosened my grip. The memory, the scar genesis of my arrival, was projected in my mind as a crushing, omnipresent psychic pressure. I staggered, my vision momentarily swimming in a haze of sickening, crimson aura. Florence rushed back to me, her eyes wide with alarm. "Kwame, what's wrong? You look like you just saw a tax bill." "She cannot see me, warrior. I am merely the truth of her city's heart. And now I am the truth of yours." Kage's voice was calm, unwavering, conveying a terrifying sense of finality. "You came here seeking to escape the judgment of the past. But I am the past. I am here to correct a flawed reality, by consuming the hypocrisy that you are built upon. This city, this magnificent symphony of sin and apathy, will be my crucible, and you, noble anchor, will be the first soul I absorb. In my stillness, your vengeance will find no purchase." Florence Lyricannon Baxter perspective. Kwame had just stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk. He looked like a mountain that had suddenly been hit by an invisible sniper. Sweat was beading on his brow, and his massive frame was trembling. "Kwame, talk to me. Is it those knuckleheads again?" He shook his head slowly, and when his eyes met mine, they were haunted, ancient. "It is not them, Florence. It is what moved them. The first Oni has found me. His essence. He has begun to weave the corruption into the soul of this city. It is a silent war, a disease of the spirit." He was talking absolute nonsense, but the sheer, raw terror in his eyes was real. He was a man who had faced down monsters and laughed. Now he was terrified by a ghost. Disease of the spirit? Like, the bad vibes are going around? I tried to joke, but the words felt hollow. He looked at me, his immense presence now an anchor of calm again, but a grim, resolute calm. He consumes the dark emotions. He fuels himself on the rage and despair of others, turning them into his own power. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the towering, indifferent buildings. The thugs were not the start, Florence. They were the first notes in his song. He is the shadow architect of malediction, and he is building his army from the ground up, one forgotten soul at a time. He then gave me a hard, direct look. You offered me a weapon, and an alliance. Now I must ask you for both. I need a blade, and I need an ally who knows the heart of this new battlefield. My world is gone. Brooklyn is where the true war begins. My mind raced. A ghost who consumes bad vibes, and makes an army of super thugs. It was insane, but the silent, brutal grace I saw in the alley told me this man was not crazy. He was right. We were no longer fighting for protection money. We were fighting for the soul of the city. Then let's go find you a goddamn sword, Black Samson, I whispered, my fierce grin returning. The architect might know the chaos of the past, but he doesn't know Lyricannon's rhythm. He doesn't know how to remix a nightmare. This could be very, very useful. Full chapter is chapter 4, titled The Ghost and the Graffiti Queen. The act name is Brooklyn in My Soul. Chapter 4, The Ghost and the Graffiti Queen. The sun had sunk below the towering geometry of the city, staining the sky a violent, bruised purple. The air was colder now, heavy with the implied threat of the previous night's supernatural encounter. The subtle corruption Kage had introduced in chapter 3 clung to the edges of Kwame's senses, a metallic, cold odor he couldn't shake. Florence, Lyricannon, Baxter perspective. We were walking through Bushwick now, heading for the part of the city where things went from gray market to pitch black market. Kwame was a wall of stoic, ancient anxiety next to me, still reeling from whatever invisible spook had jumped him. He looked like he was fighting a constant, silent battle in his head. Look, Black Samson, I said, not bothering to stop walking. We gotta talk about this ghost who eats emotions thing. You said he's building an army. Well, we need the right tools for the job. You're a katana guy, right? Kwame nodded, his gaze distant. The katana is the soul of the samurai. It is an extension of my will, forged to contain my spiritual flow and the discipline of my ancestors. That pipe, he scoffed, gesturing to the piece of iron still in his grip. It is an insult to the principle of combat. Yeah, well, this is Brooklyn, not Kyoto. We don't just walk into a Dwayne Reed and buy a master-forged blade. But I know a guy, a real-life ironmonger of the gutter. He doesn't ask questions, and he deals in things that the city wants to keep buried. We stopped in front of a massive warehouse painted floor to ceiling with abstract, blindingly complex graffiti. My own work, actually. My tag, Lyricannon, a sonic boom of color across the brick. This is your armory? Kwame asked, his disbelief clear in his voice. It is a canvas of chaotic expression. Chaos is my business, Chief, I shot back, grinning. And in this city, the chaos is the armor. We're gonna see a guy named Ghost. Samson/Kwame perspective. The man named Ghost operated in the deep shadows of the warehouse. He was a creature of the city's midnight hours, a man whose eyes held the weary, cynical knowledge of countless transactions. He was a black market merchant, a violation of every principle of honorable acquisition. But I needed a blade. The spirit of existential actionism demanded that I put aside my code for the sake of the greater war. Florence, with her bizarre, rapid-fire speech, handled the negotiation. Look, Ghost, she said, her voice dropping into a low, transactional rhythm. My guy here is an old-school collector. He's looking for something specific, something with history, something that bites, not a wall hanger, you hear me? Something that sings in the hands. Ghost looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my antiquated clothing and the palpable, but contained, energy around me. History is expensive, Lyricannon, and the real singers, they only go to the right audience. They don't tolerate tourists. He is no tourist, I interjected, stepping forward. I spoke to the merchant not as a client, but as a fellow practitioner of a deadly art. I seek a blade that was forged with purpose, one that has drunk the blood of the deserving. It must have a spirit of its own, a will to fight. I need a steel anchor against a current of pure cosmic malice. Ghost paused, a flicker of genuine interest cutting through his cynicism. He didn't scoff at my esoteric language. He saw the truth in my eyes. A spirit, you say? I got one that sings a death ballad, he muttered, moving deeper into the gloom. He returned, not with a katana, but with a machete. It was unlike any weapon I had ever seen. The blade was thick, black, and wickedly curved, its edge polished to a mirror shine. It was heavy, brutal, and utterly lacking the delicate curve of a samurai's sword. This is the Brooklyn Carver, Ghost said, his voice low with reverence. Found it in an old shipping container. It belonged to a man who cleaned up the worst kind of mess in this city. It's not fancy. It's truth. It's heavy, it keeps an edge forever, and it has no respect for tradition. It's pure, hard-won function. I reached out and took the blade. It was heavy, its balance unfamiliar. Yet as my hand closed around the wrapped handle, I felt a familiar sensation. The blade had a history of violence, of decisive purpose. It was not a katana, but it was not crude. It was a battle-forged tool. A flicker of Cade's voice returned, a whisper of scorn in my mind. A machete warrior? You trade a symbol of divine honor for a tool of a common murderer. Your fall is complete. I ignored the voice. I drew the blade, and the polished edge reflected the dim warehouse light, cutting a streak across the darkness. I executed a simple kiriroshi, a downward cut. The blade moved through the air with a deep, resonant shing, a sound that spoke of finality. It lacked the refined elegance of my lost sword, but it possessed a raw, aggressive flow. It is not my soul, I conceded, looking at Ghost, but it will serve my purpose. I looked at Florence, who was already negotiating the exorbitant price. I saw her energy, her commitment to the fight. I had the machete, she had the city. How do we find this architect? I asked her, my grip tightening on the new blade. Florence took a step back, her eyes scanning the dark, chaotic beauty of the graffiti-covered warehouse. He's using the city's darkness, right? Feeding on the rage? Then we hit him where the rage is boiling over. There's a new gang war brewing in the old industrial district. They're calling themselves the Crimson Flow, the same name I saw scrawled in blood the other night. It's not a turf war, Samson. It's a harvest, and we're going to interrupt it. The war had a target, and now the warrior had a weapon. The full chapter is Chapter 5, titled The Harvest and the Sonic Flow. The act name is Brooklyn in My Soul. Chapter 5, The Harvest and the Sonic Flow. The old industrial district was a cathedral of decay. Giant, rust-colored factory shells loomed over empty lots, their windows like dead eyes. Florence had led Kwame here to the epicenter of the Crimson Flow's activity, a derelict foundry where the air felt thick and buzzing, heavy with a rage that wasn't merely human, Samson/Kwame perspective. The moment we stepped past the boundary of the factory grounds, I felt the sickening presence of Kage's architecture. It was a distortion in the natural flow of the world, a parasitic current. The air here vibrated with a low, unnatural hum, a dissonant bass note. This is their hunting ground, I muttered, gripping the Brooklyn Carver. The heavy machete felt strangely comforting now, a weapon of simple, brutal intent in a place of esoteric evil. Florence, however, was twitching, her gaze darting everywhere. The air is loud, Samson, not with sound, but with feeling. It's like the bass line is turned up so high, it's rattling my teeth. They're here. A chilling roar cut through the silence. From the cavernous mouth of the foundry they emerged. A dozen figures, but they were no longer the disorganized thugs of the alley. They were flow mutants, humanity stretched and twisted by Kage's rage essence. Their skin was pulled taut, veined with sickly purple lines, and their eyes glowed with the familiar, terrible crimson aura of the Oni. Leading them was Sal, the one Florence had scornfully called a kingpin. Now he was something more, taller, broader, his movements a horrifying blend of brute strength and hyper-focused aggression. His hands ended in grotesque, bone-spiked extensions. Look what the sewage dragged in, Sal rasped, his voice a distorted echo of his former self, the graffiti artist, and her new lapdog. You thought you could stop the harvest flow? This is a correction. This is what truth looks like. He charged. The fight was immediate, visceral, and horrifyingly fast. Kwame became a whirlwind of efficient, ancient technique, applied through a modern, brutal blade. The Brooklyn Carver was an instrument of finality. It cleaved through the air and the mutant's defenses with shocking ease. He didn't dance. He anchored himself, letting the mutant's rage-fueled rushes break against his immovable form, then striking at the joints and pressure points. But there were too many. They attacked with a reckless disregard for injury, their every blow laced with a corrosive, emotional toxicity. Florence, Lyricannon, Baxter perspective, the scar genesis. I was fighting with the ferocity of pure, desperate adrenaline, but I was outmatched. My elbows and knees were effective, but the mutants were stronger than they should be, shrugging off hits that would have dropped a normal thug. They moved to Sal's chaotic rhythm, a sound only I seemed to fully perceive. I saw a monster coming at Kwame from his blind side. Sal had maneuvered to cut him off. Kwame was engaged with two others, the shing of the Carver, a desperate song of defense. Samson, behind you! I screamed. I lunged forward, trying to interpose myself, but Sal was faster. His spiked arms swung like a wrecking ball, aimed not for my body, but for Kwame's exposed flank. I threw up my arms in a purely defensive, instinctual move, expecting the sickening crush of bone. Instead of an impact, the world broke. In that microsecond, the intense buzzing atmosphere around me, the chaotic rhythm of the mutants, hit a wall. I felt the flow of the city, the millions of frequencies and sounds I usually blocked out, suddenly coalesce. The noise wasn't just in the air, it was in my chest, a physical weight. A soundless boom erupted from my core, a disk of vibrant purple energy, the exact color of my hair, and my most aggressive graffiti, shot out from my palms. It hit Sal's massive arm not with a physical smash, but with a shockwave of pure vibrational dissonance. It wasn't a block. It was a remix. Sal's mutated arm, mid-swing, was thrown back with impossible force. The mutants around us staggered, clutching their ears, the sonic flow overwhelming Kage's insidious baseline. The purple light flared, forming a shimmering temporary sonic shield around Kwame and me. My mind reeled, but my internal voice was shockingly calm, defining the new reality. This isn't magic. This is frequency. They're a bad vibe, and I just played the antidote. I just dropped the sickest beat this city has ever heard. Sal was howling, staggering back from the impact, his spiked hand smoking slightly where the force field had touched it. He stared at me with pure, unadulterated shock. "What in the hell was that?" he choked out, his voice cracking. I lowered my hands, the glowing purple fading back into my skin, leaving behind only the tingling residue of adrenaline and power. I looked at the terrifying figure of Sal, and then at the astonished Kwame, and I smiled, a wide, feral, and utterly defiant Brooklyn grin. "That, Sal, that was the drop," I spat, feeling the energy now thrumming beneath my skin, waiting to be used again. "And you are so off-key." Kwame, his chest heaving, looked from the retreating mutants to me. His face, usually a mask of stoic calm, was a complex blend of shock and recognition. "You possess a flow of your own," he stated, his voice barely a whisper. "A power of vibration, a countercurrent to the Oni's decay." "Yeah, I guess the architect of malediction just ran into the Lyricannon architect of the counter-rhythm," I said, feeling an exhilarating sense of purpose for the first time. The fight was terrifying, but now it was my fight. The crimson flow retreated, their rage temporarily silenced by the overwhelming force of the sonic flow. The silent war had just found its second soldier. Chapter is Chapter 6, titled The Weight of the Anchor and the Rhythm. The act name is Brooklyn in My Soul. Chapter 6, The Weight of the Anchor and the Rhythm. The air in the industrial district had cooled, the unnatural, sickening hum of the crimson flow having been temporarily silenced by Florence's purple sonic flow outburst. Kwame and Florence had retreated to a shadowy corner of the factory grounds, the sheer scale of the derelict building offering a moment of quiet reflection. They stood near a massive, rusted gear wheel, a symbol of broken industry now serving as a mute witness to their sudden supernatural reality. Samson/Kwame perspective. The machete, the Brooklyn Carver, felt heavy and honest in my hand. It was an anchor in a whirlwind of impossible events. I looked at Florence, who was leaning against the cold metal, her breathing still ragged, her eyes still shimmering with the residual light of her power. She had not merely defended herself, she had defied the principle of Oni corruption. She had introduced a counter-rhythm into Kage's Song of Decay. "Your ability," I began, my voice low. "It is not magic. It is a control of the flow itself. Kage seeks to corrupt the natural vibration of this world, to turn human rage into a dissonance that fuels him. You, Florence, you countered his frequency." She looked up at me, still processing the immense power that had ripped through her. "I just felt the noise getting louder, man. Like a dozen bad vibes trying to sync up. I didn't think, I just pushed back, tried to drop a clean beat into their messy track. It felt like my whole body turned into a speaker. A speaker of truth," I corrected her. "The samurai seeks to achieve stillness, to be the unmoving anchor against the tide of chaos. My fight is defined by the rigid discipline of my ancestors. But yours." I looked at the graffiti on the wall, the chaotic, beautiful burst of colors that was her signature. "Your power is chaos made elegant. You are not a wall. You are a remix. You take the existing noise and rearrange it into a weapon of light. This city," I swept my hand toward the surrounding buildings, "it is all noise and vibration. You, Lyricannon, are perfectly suited to be its defender." Florence, Lyricannon, Baxter perspective. His ancient formal language cut through the adrenaline. Anchor, remix. Vibration. He wasn't talking about philosophy anymore, he was talking about physics. Our physics. I pushed off the gear wheel and walked toward him, the weight of his praise and his acceptance settling heavily on my shoulders. I was no longer just the street artist with the sharp tongue. I was a warrior too. The sonic flow was real. "Okay, so I'm the remix. What's the next track?" I asked, forcing a return to the practical. The architect knows I'm a problem now. He saw what I did. He saw my colors. Kwame nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the darkness where the mutants had vanished. "He is an emotional parasite. He uses the city's sins. That last group, the Crimson Flow, they were focused on raw rage. But Kage is subtle. He is the ancient deceiver. He will move to exploit a deeper flaw. The deeper flaw, I repeated, thinking out loud. If he's the architect, he won't build with rage alone. He'll use hypocrisy. He'll use the people who talk big about doing good, but are corrupt underneath. Exactly, Kwame confirmed. The fight will shift. No longer just alley brawls. Cage will seek to control the city's power structures, the systems that are already flawed and broken. He will corrupt the institutions designed to protect the weak. For there is no greater source of human shame than the betrayal of trust. He was talking about the police, the politicians, the powerful and invisible forces that really ran Brooklyn. The thought chilled me more than facing another Flow mutant. He's going for the head of the snake, I whispered, looking out at the glittering lights of downtown, where the real power resided. Kwame placed his hand on my shoulder, his grip firm, an anchor in the truest sense. We have bought a moment of silence. Now we must use it. I have the Brooklyn Carver. You have the sonic flow. Cage is an architect of malediction, but he did not account for the Lyricannon architect of the counter-rhythm. He paused, a flicker of his ancient honor softening his stoicism. We are an alliance born of chaos, Florence. Do you understand the weight of this new burden? This is not a choice of survival. This is the choice of the anchor, the commitment to stand firm. I met his gaze, my eyes alight with defiance. I know the weight, Samson. It's heavy, but it's got a good beat. Let's go find out who Kage's next target is, and let's drop the loudest counterbeat this city has ever heard. Full chapter is Chapter 8, titled The Price of a Seat. The act name is Brooklyn in My Soul. Chapter 8, The Price of a Seat. The silence that followed Kenji's departure was not a piece, but an interlude. The scent of ozone and the invisible hum of Florence's power settled over their slice of Brooklyn like a warning. The battle with the Oni was over, but the war, as Kwame understood, had merely been escalated. Florence, Lyricannon, Baxter perspective. My hand, still vibrating slightly with the residue of the sonic flow, flew across my laptop keys. I was digging deep into the city's low-level noise. My network, the graffiti crews, the club runners, the neighborhood activists, they knew the true rhythm of Brooklyn, and that rhythm was currently all off-key. It's not the street gangs anymore, Samson, I told Kwame, who was meditating by the window. The Brooklyn Carver laid across his lap like a sleeping pet. Cage's a smart monster. He saw that street-level chaos is messy and unpredictable. You can beat a bad beat, but you can't beat a broken system. I pulled up a newsfeed featuring a smiling, impeccably dressed woman, council member Vivian Holt. Her district, strangely, was the epicenter of the Crimson Flow gang's initial activity. Vivian Holt. She ran on a platform of anti-corruption, cleaning up the toxic flow of City Hall, that kind of jazz, I explained. But lately, she's been making some weird, quiet moves. Huge zoning change proposals that benefit her brother-in-law's construction firm. Crushing small businesses to make room for luxury condos. She's trading her constituents for cash. She preaches virtue while committing a transgression, Kwame observed, his voice dark, drawing on the wisdom of the character blueprint Kage. She embodies the hypocrisy he seeks to punish and consume. She is a perfect conduit for the architect of malediction. The logic was brutal and chillingly efficient. Kage didn't need foot soldiers when he could corrupt a general. We gotta get close to her, I said, leaning back. If Kage's inside the system, we need to breach the firewall. There's a City Hall charity gala tonight. Fundraiser for Safe Streets. The irony is thick enough to choke on. Kwame looked down at his GI. They will not admit a warrior to their sanctuary of sin in this attire. I grinned, already pulling out my phone. Relax, Chief. We're in Brooklyn. Everyone's got a costume. And tonight we're cosplaying as a rich girl and her silent, very expensive bodyguard. Samson, Kwame perspective. The metamorphosis of Florence was astounding. She transformed her vibrant, chaotic clothes into an elegant black and purple dress, her face a mask of calculated poise. My own transformation was less comfortable. A tailored black suit that felt like a prison of cloth, concealing the Brooklyn Carver in a specially made harness. I was still an anchor, but now one cloaked in deception. We entered the sterile, brightly lit ballroom of a downtown hotel. The air was thick with perfume, the clatter of silverware, and the flow of greed. A subtle, shimmering energy of ambition and quiet betrayal. It was a more dangerous environment than any dark alley. The enemy here was invisible. Florence led me through the crowd, acting as my interpreter and my guide. She was masterful, effortlessly moving through conversations, her bright, loud laughter a tool of distraction. I scanned the room, searching for the telltale sign of corruption, the faint, sickening crimson aura that marked Kage's presence. Then I saw her. Councilmember Holt stood by the podium, smiling as she shook a donor's hand. And around her it was there, a sickly, pulsing ring of crimson and gray. Not explosive, but deep, ingrained. It was the signature of an emotional parasite that had found a home. Behold, warrior. A low, cold voice whispered in my mind, its arrival less of a shock and more of a sickening certainty. I am not a brute to be defeated by a sword. I am the shadow of their collective greed. And this woman, she has signed the contract willingly. She offered me the canvas of this city, and I will be its new architect. I locked eyes with Holt. Her smile was flawless, but her eyes were cold, distant, and held that specific, empty gaze I recognized from the Flow mutants. Before I could move, before I could utter a sound, Florence gripped my arm. "She's making her speech," Florence hissed. "Listen, the lie is about to become public." Councilmember Holt stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted. "My friends," she began, her voice smooth and compelling. "Tonight we stand together for safe streets. We commit to tearing down the old, dangerous structures that breed violence, and replacing them with new beginnings and unwavering order." Her words, unwavering order, were Kage's own language. Her speech was a rhetorical blueprint for the Oni's takeover. As she spoke, I felt a new surge of energy flood the room. Not chaotic rage, but depressive gravity. The air felt heavy, crushing, and the glittering crowd seemed to subtly slump, their high spirits dampened by a sudden, pervasive, suffocating despair. Kage was using the fear of the donors, weaponizing their greed and anxiety. "Kwame, that's not her talking," Florence's voice strained beside me. "That's the beat. It's the sound of the city giving up." A figure moved through the crowd. She was quiet, almost invisible. A woman with short, dark hair, dressed in simple, neutral gray. Her eyes, however, were intensely focused, moving across the room with a calm, analytical intensity. She moved straight for Councilmember Holt. She stopped several feet from the podium. As Councilmember Holt delivered a particularly venomous line about the necessity of, quote, surgical removal of the cancerous elements, the woman in gray simply spoke, her voice clear and precise. "Your facts are just numbers, Councilmember," the woman said, completely cutting across Holt's speech. "You see a failing policy, but I see 1,000 broken lives. And I can hear the unspoken fear in your voice, the lie you're selling this room. Your order is a symptom of your own terror." At her words, an almost silent wave of melancholy flow erupted from the woman in gray. The crimson aura around Councilmember Holt flickered violently, and for a heart-stopping second, Holt's professional mask cracked, revealing a flash of sheer personal grief and profound loss. Kwame instantly recognized the sophisticated power. This woman was not fighting the flow, she was reading it. The mysterious woman looked directly at me and Florence, her expression neutral but piercing. Her energy was a clear, empathic current that cut through the corruption. "The architect of malediction has built a flawed structure," she said, her voice now addressing the entire room with quiet authority. "I am here to audit the damage." She was Ebetove Elsa Nilsson, the architect of empathy, and she had just announced her arrival as an independent force in Kage's war. Full chapter is Chapter 9, titled The Anatomy of a Lie, Ebetove Elsa Nilsson. The act name is Brooklyn in My Soul. Chapter 9, The Anatomy of a Lie, Ebetove Elsa Nilsson. The ballroom was a pressure cooker of unearned complacency and quiet dread. I stood by the podium, my entire being a finely tuned instrument, listening to the emotional frequency of the room. Most people felt a smooth background buzz, a mix of social anxiety, professional ambition, and mild boredom. But 3 frequencies stood out, screaming their dissonance against the backdrop. The first was the council member, Vivian Holt. Her words, so polished and comforting, were a thick, sweet glaze over a core of profound internal decay. Her surface emotions were a rehearsed set: confidence, sincerity, moral authority. But beneath that, I heard the churning metallic hum of something parasitic, the Crimson Flow signature. It wasn't rage, not like the street thugs. Kage, the architect of malediction, was more sophisticated here. He was feeding on Holt's shame and greed, but his flow manifested as pure dread. He had taken her secret fear of exposure and turned it into an overwhelming, paralyzing gravity, which he then broadcast to the room, dampening the will of the attendees. I could see the tiny, red-tinged threads of this psychic leeching around her nervous system, pulling the strings of her mouth to utter the lies. I am the auditor of this flow. You cannot hide from me. That's why I spoke. I didn't care about decorum or the political lies she was selling. I cared about the emotional violence she was committing. When I cut across her speech, I didn't use logic. I used a wave of pure, concentrated melancholy. It was an empathic countershock, the raw emotional truth of 1,000 broken lives her corruption was affecting. It hit the parasitic flow like a wall of static, forcing the Oni's influence to momentarily recoil and exposing the authentic human pain in Holt's core. The woman stumbled, her political mask dissolving for a fraction of a second, revealing the gaping wound of her own profound personal loss. The true reason she'd sold her soul for money. That flicker of genuine grief was all the proof I needed. The Oni was real, and its power was exactly as the old text described, a master of emotional camouflage. Then I felt the other two dissonances. One was a raw, primal anchor. Kwame. He was a mountain of contained discipline, a warrior who had achieved a terrifying stillness. I could feel the ancient, refined flow of his training, a steady, unyielding current of honor and purpose. He was looking at me with the shock of recognition, the silent acknowledgement that another true player was on the board. The heavy, dark flow of the weapon he carried, the Brooklyn Carver, was a perfect contrast to his own spiritual control. The third was a volatile, beautiful rhythm. Florence. Her flow was a chaotic, brilliant explosion of defiance and creation. She was an open chord, a constantly shifting sonic pulse. When I saw the shimmering purple residue of her recent sonic flow, her counterbeat, on her hands, I understood immediately. This wasn't a girl who found a power. This was a girl who always was the power, the pure, unmuted emotional truth of the city made manifest. She fought with noise. They were perfectly balanced, the anchor, stillness, and the rhythm, vibration, the past and the present. And I was the auditor, the one who could read the architect's blueprint. My job in the Flow Trust Committee wasn't to fight with blades or sonic waves. My job was strategic transparency. I walked away from the podium, my eyes connecting with theirs across the panicked, murmuring crowd. I didn't need to speak to them. The empathic cognition was faster than any whispered plan. I am Ebba. I know Keg is here. I know what he wants. And I know you two are fighting a brute force war against a structural problem. I gave them a minimal nod, a transaction of trust. I couldn't risk revealing everything now. Holt security detail was moving in, their anxious professional aggression easily read as a physical threat. I needed to escape and secure an actual meeting. "Excuse me, ma'am, you need to leave the venue," a security guard mumbled, his own fear of losing his job a louder sound than his instruction. "Of course," I replied calmly, walking toward the exit. I smiled at the guard, a genuine smile of empathy, letting him briefly feel the soothing, unburdened current of my own personal peace. His anxiety immediately eased, and he stepped aside. As I exited the ballroom and melted into the quiet, upscale hotel lobby, I knew what I had to do. Kege's corruption was a subtle, insidious web, but I could audit the threads one by one. I would use my unique vantage point, the ability to see the emotional truth of the system, to provide the warrior and the anarchist with the target coordinates. They would provide the action. I would provide the architecture. The Oni cannot hide from the truth of their victims. And in this city of 10 million lies, the truth is the most powerful weapon of all. Full chapter is chapter 10, titled The Price of a Seat, and it is the conclusion of Act 1, Brooklyn in My Soul. Chapter 10, The Architect's Blueprint. The chaos in the ballroom had been contained by Ebba Tove Elsa Nilsson's swift exit and a lingering paralysis of Kage's depressive gravity. Kwame and Florence had slipped out in the ensuing confusion, their formal attire a useful camouflage that now felt like a second skin of deceit. They were not alone for long. Ebba Tove Elsa Nilsson perspective. I found them where the flow had led me, the sterile, quiet anonymity of a city bus idling a block from the hotel. I sat down across from them, immediately reading the two starkly different frequencies emanating from the pair. Kwame, the deep, cold anchor of discipline, and Florence, the electric, vibrant pulse of defiance. The three of us were a sudden, unholy trinity of counterforce. "The council member, Vivian Holt," I began, my voice low and precise, cutting through the bus's mechanical hum. "She is a symptom, not the disease. The core of the infection is the system she serves." Cage used her to broadcast a massive wave of despair. He fed on the collective fear of the financial elite. It was a test of systemic corruption, and his power grew significantly. Florence leaned forward, her expression intense. "So where's the next beat drop? Where's he hitting next? The cops? The courts? He is going for the fundamental flow of the city," I stated, pulling a complex diagram from my bag, a map of the city's power infrastructure, annotated with my own empathic cognition notations. The flow of electricity, of communication, of physical movement. Cage's power is amplified by anonymity and systemic betrayal. He needs to plunge the city into literal and figurative darkness. I pointed to a node on the map, the main power substation that managed Brooklyn's oldest industrial grid. The target is this, the blackout. Total systems failure. The resulting fear, chaos, and anger from the city's populace will be a feast of flow energy that would allow him to fully materialize the next phase of his invasion. He is using an architect of his own, a human operative with access to the grid. Who? Kwame's single word was a profound demand for truth. Harlan Drake, I supplied. He is the chief maintenance engineer for the district. A man of quiet, desperate shame. A widower. He lost his home to a shady zoning deal a year ago, the same kind Vivian Holt just pushed through. His grief was profound. Cage didn't corrupt him with greed or rage. He corrupted him with the illusion of justice. The promise that he could wipe the slate clean and restart the city's moral flow by simply shutting it down. His flow signature is a sickening mix of profound sorrow and misplaced vengeance. Samson Kwame perspective. The deception was profound. The architect of malediction was not using brute force. He was using the city's own moral wounds against itself. This was not a physical battle. It was a war of principles. The warrior's duty is to protect the innocent and the flow of the land, I stated, gripping the hilt of the concealed Brooklyn Carver. We must intercede before the systemic failure. We must sever Kage's connection to the host. This will be different from the streets, Florence warned, her voice serious. We can't just swing a machete at a power grid, and my sonic flow needs something to disrupt. A big, powerful beat to run a counter-frequency against. You will have it, I told her. Drake's sabotage requires specific nodes to be overloaded. Each one is a point of concentrated electrical and emotional flow. That concentrated energy will be the beat you need to drop your counter rhythm. Ebba then laid out the strategic blueprint. This wasn't a philosophical musing anymore. It was an actionable target. So you're the brains, he's the muscle, and I'm the sonic interference? I summarized, trying to ground the cosmic threat in street terms. Ebba offered a fractional, almost imperceptible smile. You are the vibrational defiance, Florence. You are the only one who can counter the frequency of Kage's corruption if it reaches a systemic level. Kwame will be the anchor in the storm of physical collapse. I will be the sight guiding you through the dark paths of Drake's betrayed soul. I looked at Kwame, his profile framed by the dark window. He nodded, his eyes glowing with the fierce intensity of a warrior who had found his purpose in a new age. He was ready to fight a power grid. Then the fight has a new rhythm, I stated. A surge of adrenaline mixing with the nascent sonic flow humming in my veins. Where do we find this Harlan Drake? Ebba put the van in gear, pulling silently away from the curb. Drake is at his maintenance headquarters, preparing the initial sabotage points. We move now. Our goal is to neutralize Drake and sever Kage's connection to the power infrastructure before sunrise. The vehicle sped into the Brooklyn night, carrying the three disparate forces, the anchor of the past, the counter-rhythm of the present, and the auditor of the truth toward the next battlefield. The time for reflection was over. Act 1. Brooklyn and my soul had closed. The war for the soul of Brooklyn had begun. The characters in the story up to the end of Act 1 are main characters and protagonists, Kwame, the anchor, a samurai warrior displaced from the past, also referred to as Samson and the Black Samurai. He is the anchor of the team, known for his discipline and the Mandingo-style flow. He wields the Brooklyn Carver machete. Florence Baxter, Lyricannon, a graffiti artist and co-protagonist from Brooklyn. She is the Brooklyn flow master, the Lyricannon architect of the counter-rhythm, and the vibrational defiance, who fights using a sonic flow of concentrated vibrational energy. Ebba Tove Elsa Nielsen, the auditor, an independent force and a new ally. She is the architect of empathy and the auditor, who can read the emotional frequencies and the antagonist's blueprint. Antagonists and corrupted figures. Kage, the architect of malediction, the primary antagonist. He is the first Oni, the progenitor, and the shadow architect, who corrupts the city's flow by feeding on human emotions like rage, shame, and despair. Sal, the initial leader of the street gang, the Roach Clan, who was later transformed into a flow mutant and a key figure in the Crimson Flow gang. Vivian Holt, the council member and political figure, who was corrupted by Kage's hypocrisy and agreed to become a systemic conduit for the Oni's power. Harlan Drake, the chief maintenance engineer who is corrupted by Cage using a profound sense of grief and misplaced vengeance to attempt to cause the blackout by sabotaging the power grid. Supporting characters. Kenji Kwame's old friend and the leader of the Time Cops, Guardians of the Timeline. He appears to stabilize the temporal rift and urges Kwame to return to the past. Avum, a member of the Time Cops team led by Kenji. Tempest, a member of the Time Cops team led by Kenji. Ghost, the black market merchant, known as the ironmonger of the gutter, who sells Kwame the Brooklyn Carver machete.